leading work package 2 in the LUNZ project. I hope you don't mind if we are recording the session today for future reference. This session will be an introduction to GenAI, so to generative AI, and it is co-organized by Work Package 2 and Digital Tag of the LUNZ Hub project. We thought that this introduction to GenAI and its use to communication as a communication and visualization tool would assist our preparations for the Big Tent event in September in Wales. But we also thought that it would be for people interested in the wider potential of GenAI and its use in regards with creative research, with analysis, with visualization, and with stakeholder engagement. So without any further ado, I'll give the floor to Mike Harford. Mike, if you could introduce briefly yourself.
Yeah,
and
thank you,
also, I do invite people for any questions and comments to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Mike, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evie, and thank you everybody for coming. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. Nothing's changed technologically before we start talking about advanced things. Yeah, so my name's Mike Harford. Well, first of all, I should check. Can you see my screen as well? Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Harford. I'm a scientist at Visuality now. By background, I'm a biodiversity scientist, biodiversity researcher. So I did a postdoc in computational ecology, predicting the future of ecosystems, worked for the United Nations Environment Programme for 12 years as their lead ecosystem scientist, and then joined Visuality a few years ago to work in the science team, particularly around nature data. I also still keep a foot in the sort of research world with an adjunct position at the University in Canada and some lecturing here at the University in Cambridge. Yeah, so I was quite interested by the opportunity here that came from Evie and through the digital advisory group to provide this, I guess, a really sort of fairly rudimentary introduction to generative AI, to give it its full name. And before I kick off, I wanted to just, like, as a check-in and also to gauge people's familiarity with generative AI. I wondered if you could, in the chat, just give like a number between 1 and 10 about how familiar you are with generative AI. Where 1 is you've never used it before, possibly not read anything about it. 10 is I'm a regular user, use it for many tasks, perhaps even know a bit about the modeling that's underneath it, just to give a quick idea to me of where people are. Oh wow, Ebru's come in with a 10. Well done, Ebru. So I should say my colleague Ebru is on the call, who's works also at Visuality in the business development team. Brilliant. Okay, that's really useful. So there's quite a mixture, which is great to hear. So hopefully, I'm hoping. So I've pitched this very rudimentary. Hopefully, it's useful for most people and gives people some insights into some applications of AI. It's useful to everybody. So trying to move on. So very quickly to introduce Visuality. So we are an environmentally and socially focused digital design and development company. We have a goal to help create a better future for our planet and society, and we do that by working with NGOs, businesses, and governments to design and develop high impact digital tools and data-driven strategies. We are around 50 people headquartered in Madrid, but with people across Europe. All of our projects have this science-based origins, with a team of scientists working on them, which is where I'm based. And we've been over 15 years of experience working with a range of leading organizations to try and make this stuff happen. And recently, generative AI has really come to the fore as a tool, medium, technology to really allow us to accelerate some of that impact that we're trying to drive in the world. So very quickly, in terms of what I'm going to try and cover today, firstly, and hopefully some of it will be, I'm trying to get you guys to be hands-on with some of it, people who haven't used these tools before. But I'm going to kick off with some little background on what is generative AI, move on to the different platforms, models around there. How do we drive the system? Some of the applications of generative AI, and then finish off with some of the risks that I think it's important to be aware of when using the system. So, in terms of what is generative AI, I cheated here and I asked some GenAI models to try and explain what generative AI is, and I asked it. So this is me talking to a large language model or generative AI system to play the role of Professor Hannah Fry, the well-known TV presenter, to explain generative AI to a non-expert audience. Not suggesting you're not experts, but not experts possibly in generative AI. In less than 75 words, giving some real-world examples. And this is what it's came back with. Generative AI is a branch of artificial intelligence. It creates new content, text, images, music by learning patterns in the underlying data. And that's the important thing. Could be things like drafting emails, producing original artwork, or designing new drug molecules. And here's just some of the sort of real-world examples of generative AI beyond the sort of the text interaction that many people have. So AlphaFold was this system that Google DeepMind created to predict the structure or the folding patterns of different protein molecules. It's become really powerful for the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries or research industries. And then here's just some visualizer, a video showing predictions from a generative AI model of near-term weather forecasting based on basically understanding patterns in underlying data of weather systems. So it's quite a wide-ranging beast, this generative AI. I went on to ask one of these systems, I think this was Gemini, to generate me an image demonstrating the application of GenAI for text, image, and music creation, and it came up with this rather, I don't know what you say, magical looking image. And I did wanted to just touch on that. So I think in many ways we can sprinkle AI and probably generative AI into sentences as a type of magic to solve solutions. I think it's important to realize what they are. So these are colossal, non-linearly constructive, but probabilistic models. And they're incredibly powerful, but they are ultimately just from in the grassroots probabilistic models of what might come next, given the data that's been trained on. So very quickly, and this is I should be very honest, I'm not an expert in deep learning systems, nor indeed on the transparent models that go into this, but just as a bit of context for how language models work, and then I'll touch on audio and vision ones. So the systems work by taking, for example, a sentence or a set collection of words that might be coming into the system, turning those into tokens. These are the atomic units that they're going to be used in the system, converting those into a mathematical representation, and then using that mathematical representation and relationships between those words to try and predict, in the first instance, what's the most likely next token, next word, let's say, that might come following on from the words that it's got. And it can do this obviously on lots of training data. It does it in an unsupervised way, so it can take something that, for example, has been written before, take some words out of it, try and predict what the next word is, and then use that to improve its prediction for the next time. So it does that across colossal amounts of data. And what it allows us to do is to do this sort of what's called causal language modeling, which is predicting the next word. So for example, in this sentence here, as you guys will be able to do clearly intuitively, if you saw the words, when I hear rain on my window, I fill in the blank. What the language model would be doing is making a prediction of what's the most likely next word. So it might be I make, because it's going to say a cup of tea, I feel, because I'm going to feel something about the rain, etc., etc. And it's picking the most likely one. So that's this kind of causal language model. There's also like a masked language prediction, which is predicting a word within a sentence. But more sophisticated models, or getting to more advanced large language model. Sorry, and I'm using large language model here for particularly for the language application of generative AI. So these are able to analyze and also then predict many tokens so that they can create whole sentences. So, for example, rather than predicting the next word, it can make a prediction for the next sentence, which may be done by stringing together individual word predictions or another approach. So when I hear rain on my window, you can then make a prediction, make a cup of tea, I feel grey, etc. So it's still doing this probabilistic prediction. And then sufficiently large language models can generate whole paragraphs and indeed entire essays, which is kind of where we are now with the largest models that are around. Sort of, I know this is a bit whistle stop, but hopefully it's in some way useful. This is coming from the ecological domain, but just trying to illustrate how these models are used to generate audio signals or realistic audio signals in this figure A, and in B we're looking at visual creation of realistic images in that ecological setting. What we're demonstrating in the top part of the figure, the A panel, is the use of models to try and recreate real-world animal vocalizations. So what this is called a generative adversarial network, which is training two parts of the model. So we have a model. We have the first line is where we've got real-world vocalizations. By the way, can you see my mouse pointer? I'm moving it. That's good. So we got real animal vocalizations, which are obviously constructed to a digital signature. And then we have a model here which is differentiating those real data from fake or rather simulated vocalizations. And those are constructed by taking some random noise, random pattern of signals, and then having a model that tries to turn that into real world, into real vocalizations. And so we're trying to fit a model which discriminates between the fake and the real data, and then we're trying to trick that with a model we're training at the same time, which is trying to make the highest probability that it can that the discriminator gets it wrong, that it can't make the difference between them. So that allows this generator to then, once it's trained fully, to be able to predict real world vocalization patterns. In the same way, in the construction of images, this is demonstrating a diffusion-based approach to creating realistic images. What the models might do is start with a real image and then add some random noise onto that in one step, and then learn what it has to do if it adds adding noise adding noise back to that to try and recreate the real image. So it goes through steps of making the image, degrading the image, and then recreating the image, and it learns gradually to how to create the realistic image from patterns of random noise. Again, that was just a whistle-stop tour of what ultimately is underlying some of these models. I wanted to touch very briefly on my perspectives on why this is important. Three things I wanted to say here. Like it or not, whether you like this technology or not, it is rapidly growing, and especially within the younger generations. And sorry, take these figures with a pinch of salt because they were just taken from sources on the internet. I haven't found a peer-reviewed article that kind of goes into this in detail, but I think these numbers are probably broadly representative of the sort of makeup in terms of age distribution of people using, in this case, this is both ChatGPT, which is a model that comes from the OpenAI company. Of the nearly 400 million users, nearly half of them are coming from people between 18 and 24. It's rapidly growing, and particularly for many use cases, particularly for younger generations. It's useful now, I'm going to argue, for increasing efficiency of what you do in the general workplace setting. And I think in the near-term future, and especially the long-term, it's going to completely transform the way that society generates and shares information, data, and knowledge. So that's my kind of introductory bit about what GenAI is. and are shifting now to kind of different platforms and systems. And I go through this quite quickly. So this is a mapping that I found from the University of Hong Kong libraries about different generative AI applications for use in the research setting. And you can see multiple different purposes here, but then a whole plethora of different platforms which are available for research. I'm not going to go through those exhaustively. I'm going to pick out a few general purpose, I would say, generative AI models. So I'm going to use Gemini. I also have used ChatGPT and OpenAI. But for the purposes of what we look at today, I'm going to look at, there's two different models I wanted us to try and engage with in a hands-on way. So if you have a Google account, then it is very straightforward for you to use the Gemini model. It's a free to use model if you wanted to do that. Alternatively, if you wanted to try out one of these large language model generative AI systems in a simple way, so without this full functionality, Mistral AI allows you to engage with one of these chatbots without even having an account, not having to register anything. So I'll put those two links into the chat if you want to follow on and do some things. That's the Gemini link, and here is the Mistral link. Hopefully that's worked to get you onto one of the systems. I will skip on then, just whilst you're setting up to like this. How do we drive the system? So this, for people who've used this before, this will be familiar. For people who haven't used these systems before, then hopefully this is useful. So the majority of the systems available at the minute have a chat-based interface. Here's an image of the Mistral system with this nice phrase, ask the chat. So you would put in the question or the thing that you want the system to do into this, what's called the prompt window here. A prompt is the set of instructions or the things that you want the model to do. I should be able to hopefully switch over to, I've opened my Gemini model here. Hopefully you can see that, not the slides anymore. So here I will be able to type in requests and things that I want the model to do into the prompt window. And there's various things that we could do there. In terms of just a little bit more information on what is a prompt, as I said before, this is the input you're going to provide to the model to essentially make it generate a response. Primarily, this is a text interface, but if you have the Gemini or one of these systems on your phone, you can use an audio interface to talk to it, and it can actually talk back to you as well in a conversational kind of setting. But the prompt can range from a simple question or request, like my request to generate an image demonstrating the application of generative AI for text, image, and music, or it can be a complex set of instructions, quite long, multi-step things that you want the model to do. You can include computer code snippets, writing examples to kind of prime the model. This is what the kind of thing I want to do. Hand-drawn images or sketches that you want it to convert or turn into notes, etc., etc. So it's quite a broad-ranging way of talking to the model. And then very quickly, a few notes about what's this topic called prompt engineering. How do you try and write the prompt in a way that helps the model to generate the output that you actually want? So some quick points here is when you're requesting or making your prompt, be very clear about the objectives that you want of what you want from the model. So using action verbs, being clear to define what your format is, so as in the length of the document, what type of document or output you're asking, what kind of tone style you want, and specifying the audience can often help. If you can, providing context or background information. If you want to reference particular documents, you can do that. If you want to already define, this is an example of the text that I want to create in this style, that's really useful. And then the being specific, obviously, I suppose going back to something I wanted to say earlier, that generative AI we can think of as kind of as a extremely knowledgeable and generally quite good at reasoning assistant that's on all the time. And so in the same way that we would work with other people, if we can be precise about the language and what we want them to do, that helps the model to do the same thing. As I say, yes, the last point I was going to say, being specific and precise, quantifying the output, and if it's a very complex task, breaking it down into multiple steps. So asking the model to do one step, and then when it's replied from that, then go on to the next step. Okay, so then I wanted to sort of push it over to you guys, for people who haven't used the system before, to just try a prompt if you're on one of these systems. I can do something at the same time. If anybody's got a question and they're not on the system, I can ask that. So I might say, this is probably a very poorly thought out question, but just to show you in operation, I've written something pretty ambiguous or vague in terms of question. I haven't defined any audience, or particularly the style that I want to. And the model's gone off and done some thinking, drawn on the literature it's previously been trained on, and come up with a set of issues that it thinks that might be important to be considered in that transition. Okay. Is everybody happy up till now? Good. Okay. So here I want to move into kind of the application space of things that we can do, or maybe that I'd ask you guys to do with the model. So one of the things that obviously Evie and Martin asked particularly for was, how do we use these type of systems in a creative sense for, I'm going to say generally for synthesizing, but illustrating, visualizing, or making more accessible, I guess, discussions, information, things that have come up during. This is mostly a stakeholder workshop, the Big Tent event, Evie. So different parties discussing. So what I did in advance of that, just to try and help this particular application, is I asked Gemini to simulate a set of notes that had come from a discussion between 4 stakeholders. Sorry, this may be the wrong type of question, Evie, but I just wanted something for people to work with. So I said, yeah, people workshop discussing ways to increase carbon, water, and biodiversity benefits of land use decisions in the context of North Wales. And so I generated this set of notes. I think I said about 500 words long. It created then this set of notes, including some fictional characters. We have a councillor from a local policymaker, a local farmer. We have an ecological researcher, and somebody from the North Wales Wildlife Trust. I will share these in a minute. And then what I did with those notes is is simulating some of the things we might want to do in that Big Tent event. So could we produce some kind of diagram that illustrates the different views or perspectives? I got the system to generate a poem. I don't know if that's useful or not, but if you're interested in using those notes for doing something here, I'm going to I've put them as a Google Doc that hopefully you should all have access to. I will paste it in there. Just as something that is somewhat relevant contextually to LUNZ that you could play with in one of these models. I could do that as well. I should have those notes open. Here we are. I'm going to do something. Does anybody want to ask a question of those notes? Evie, shall I generate a figure again, or what would you like to do in this Big Tent event? If I can ask.
Well, that's a surprise, so we shouldn't share the details.
Okay, all right, fine. All right. Oh, I see Anya's got her hand up. you want to go ahead?
Sorry, very basic and probably very stupid question. I never used it before. So it was just that the whole image and text was generated from potential title and the people that you provided to the system. Nothing else?
No, from the whole set of notes. So I'll show you what I did here. So let me just say, there are
Oh, I see. So you provided notes, and from those notes, they created the picture.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
try and do that here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's clear.
So all I'm doing here, so I could add the note as a link to the Google Doc. I'm going to just paste them in here as sort of a text that the model can work with. I've not been thinking very hard about the prompt I'm using, so don't take that as an example of how to do it, but just to illustrate it, generating the image. Hopefully it comes up with something.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, well, okay, it's done something different. There you go. I'm not sure if that's useful or not, but it shows people.
Yeah, it gives, more understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, I do. Okay. Yeah. Pat, is that? I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah. And I can regularly generate fantastic images like that one, or you could do it in this style of Chagall or Picasso or whatever. But what I've never succeeded, even when I've got quite defined prompts and ideas, is to generate an infographic or graphical abstract type of picture image, which includes a bit of useful text around flowchart or whatever. Any comments about that?
Yeah. If you just hold, I might have in the next slide or so. I kind of flashed that a little bit in the research section or analysis section. I generated an infographic that might answer your question. If it doesn't, then just shout at that point, and I can come back, Pat. I'll step through something.
Sorry to interrupt, Mike. Just
Yeah.
for the house rules, maybe we could ask the questions, either the ones that they are in the chat or raising the hand at the end of your presentation, if you don't mind. So then we give some time for discussion. Is it better for you, Mike?
I don't mind. It's fine. It's fine as long as we can keep going. If it's not just endless questions about this one thing, which it isn't.
Okay.
So I'm as you want, Evie. If we save them to the end, and
I would suggest to finish your slides, and then we open the floor for questions or comments or discussions.
Okay. Sounds good. But hopefully, Pat, I'll address that in some way in a slide or two.
Sorry, Pat, for interrupting.
Sorry, I just realized I muted myself. I didn't mean to do it. Okay, so that's that kind of application. Feel free, obviously, to play around with that in the background. A couple of quick comments about the use of these tools in a research context. I think, and I'm defining research quite broadly, probably not a specific, well, maybe you can judge for yourselves. So I think it's useful to know that these tools commonly now include this concept of a deep research option, which is a way of asking them to go away and review literature, look for links around a topic. So typically involves a far more reasoned and extensive search and response process. So in Gemini, for example, and most other systems, there is this button here. So if we switch that on, it's going to ask me to make a new chat. I won't do it because it takes quite a long time to actually to run the system. But for example, if there's a topic that you don't know anything about, or you want to find out more about, it's quite a useful way of getting a deeper dive into it, and then some links as a kicking off point, much like you might do in a very preliminary literature review. I think there's a real value for these systems in terms of summarizing papers, documents, and identifying the gaps, opportunities, these kind of things. So I think that kind of efficiency gain, clearly they don't going to replace the knowledge you get from reading a paper in its entirety, but for summarizing a lot of literature or condensing that can be very valuable. I think they're extremely valuable for creating. So they're extremely powerful in generating code. computational code. So I'll come into that in a second. So in terms of creating models, for example, you have a methodology of a paper, you'd like to create something that represents that. Extremely valuable for that. Diagrams will come on to in a minute, that try to represent or reproduce existing research. So this is the part where I kind of get into the idea of infographics. So that there's a couple of things I wanted to mention here. So in terms of analysis, so one of the things the models are really good at is writing code to answer questions. And so I've not really done that much of this myself because my background is in kind of data analysis. So I kind of tend to write the fundamental analysis myself. But if you have a data set and you want to create a very rapidly create some visualization for it, you can upload the raw data like CSV file, or I think indeed Excel files, to the system and ask it to do analysis for you, to generate some code that would do what you wanted it to do. I have a quick data set here if people want to play with. It's about it's from Rothamsted, I think. It's a data set of different fertilization measures and their effects on soil carbon properties. So it's quite a simple data set. I used GenAI earlier to ask for Housefield treatment effects. So I uploaded that data set and asked it to analyze the data and produce a figure showing the effects of different treatments at Housefield. And it created a Python script to create the visualization. But then I said, actually, I want to see that visualization live on the screen. So if I had Python or another language, I could have run the code that it generated here and create the image offline. I then asked, could you show me the figure? And I opened this, at least in Gemini, there's this tab called Canvas, which allows you to sort of interactively work with the model. And when I did that, so here I've got it open already, what it has here is the ability to generate an infographic about the data. And Pat, I'm not sure if this is getting to the kind of thing that you were interested in. And it's a very simple example. What it's done there is create essentially some HTML code that does, I think, probably encodes directly into the HTML the data underlying things, or does some analysis of it, but produces some descriptive content, some figures that on a very trivial review look like they're kind of useful information that is summarized from that very simple data set. Obviously, there's the option here to then keep interacting with that, to tailor it in a particular way, or if you spot something that isn't correct, then you can try and ask to adjust that. Okay, so that's analysis side of things. How are we doing for time? Okay, good. So very quickly moving into risk, and I think I've seen a couple of questions, so I haven't answered them then. I'll try and come back to them at the end. But several of them I think have been around accuracy, risk, accuracy data, that kind of thing, which I'm going to touch a little bit on now. So I think there are many risks associated with these models, including the concept of hallucinations, which is inaccuracies or wrong information being presented by the model in an apparently factual way. The issue of data privacy and associated with that data sovereignty, environmental impacts associated with using the model. And then I think there's a big section which is around the misuse of these models. I'm not going to focus on the misuse parts, because I don't believe you guys are going to misuse them in a malicious way. So in terms of the hallucinations, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that or can see that it's a model, so it inevitably will make incorrect predictions. This idea of hallucination is a response generated by AI that contains false or misleading information, but it's presented in a way that makes you think that it's factually correct. I saw these statistics again on Wikipedia, I think it was, about the portion of time that we see hallucinations and errors. And I'm sure these numbers are changing through time, and the models are, in some ways, being trained on bigger data sets, getting more accurate, but probably becoming broader in scope and being used for more complex tasks. So it's hard for me to rationalize whether they're becoming, whether hallucinations are becoming less frequent or we don't expect that to happen. Just to illustrate it, I found this nice example. This is a AI generating video of the train track. I think it's the Glenfinnan viaduct in Scotland, which looks great. However, there's only one train track on the Glenfinnan viaduct, and this is showing two. If you look at the train in detail, it's got two chimneys on the engine, and it's got some carriages that are 2 or 3 times as long as the other one. So there's just to visually illustrate the effect of as hallucinations. That's happening in images, happens also in text as well. The model thinks it's doing the right thing, but actually it's creating something false. Oops. I'm going to try and change slide. Okay, data privacy I think is really important, particularly for people working with sensitive data. So the prompts, the information you put into the model is going to be used to train the underlying. It's going to be taken by those systems and used to ostensibly for training next generations of the model. There are options in most systems to deactivate that activity tracking. So the conversations aren't stored, well, they can be stored at least on Gemini for, I think, 72 hours or something, under the justification, they say, of being able to respond to any issues associated with that. And there's no history preserved. And I know some organizations have firewalled implementations of these models which prevent information going outside of the system. I think it's something to be very aware of. I try very hard not to put anything that I don't want. I wouldn't want to be made public into these systems at all, because I think that it's not clear to me where this data is going. So that's something I'd emphasize. I'm not an expert in this, so please just, yeah, I guess it's a word of caution to not just throw everything sensitive into these models. And then lastly, environmental impacts, which I think is really important to be aware of. And I'm sure you come across this type of information. Training of these particularly the largest models requires a huge amount of energy. I saw an International Energy Agency report showing that the biggest models available now have estimated to take 310 gigawatt hours of electricity to train, which is equivalent to the annual consumption of 115,000 UK households. Like, so they are colossally energy intensive. In terms of the actual, so that's the training part, which is the most intensive thing. In terms of individual tasks that you ask the model to do, this plot here is showing the energy requirements of different prompts. So low complexity or low low complexity text generation tasks are relatively low energy requirement. Highly complex tasks, obviously, like deep research, involve more energy requirement. Image generation is somewhere in the middle. Creation of videos is incredibly energy intensive. And so this is comparing energy associated with video production. So I note the different scale that we've got between the two plots. Creating a video is about twice as energy intensive as charging a laptop, which is quite staggering. So there are real world environmental, that's gone the wrong way, consequences in terms of energy and also in terms of water usage for cooling. I'm not saying that water is disappearing, but it is being abstracted and then returned to the system in some way, to the ecosystem. This prediction of annual water withdrawal for global AI in 2027 is equivalent to 50% of the UK's national water withdrawal. So huge impact. Okay, I'm going to stop there now. Hopefully that'll leave time to us to discuss questions and other things. But thank you for listening. I hope it was useful. Evie, how do you want to do questions? Shall I just look through the chat?
Thank
or
you.
Do you want to...
Thank you very much, Mike. It was a really good presentation, very insightful and very clear for people like me that I am in the lower ranking of your question in the beginning.
Well,
so
yeah, no.
I would suggest to follow the questions on chat, but before doing that, I think Pat can finish his question because I interrupt him during the session. So to be fair.
Yeah, so it seems an obvious application is to help you make a graphical abstract where you know what it wants. But even for graphs, I often find that you get complete nonsense in the axis labels. And I've just, for example, put your farmyard manure fertilization one, and it comes up with this is Llama Proton I'm using, and it just both legends are complete nonsense.
Fine. I mean, I don't have a comment other than yes. I think the. I mean, I think so. Yes, I'm not an expert in that that type of prompting. I think two things. One is about the model that you use. I don't know so much about Llama Proton. I mean,
so it's just what I happen to use, but no model I've found.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
I put the output in the chat.
I did put in. I asked it to describe a model that I'm very familiar with from a paper, and it came up with something quite unrecognizable. So I think the model wasn't accurate. It wasn't, and it also sort of duplicated some terms and things. So it would. I think you need to be careful about the accuracy.
Yes,
of it.
I totally agree with that, 100%. And I definitely there is. For my use of it has been, unless it's a trivial task, it's going to require multiple rounds of prompting to get you where you want it to be, and probably some example setting of this is how I want you to do it. But definitely requiring review and things. Just out of interest on the model, by model you mean a computational model that you're asking it to summarize, or a figurative sort of framework?
Well, there was a model in the paper. I'm just wondering, how can I copy this over? Hold on. I'm not sure if I can copy. Yes, let's share my screen. So I just chose something I was familiar with, which isn't related quite to LUNZ. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So, but I haven't got a picture of the original model because there was a diagram in the paper which had sort of you can see you've got openness and competence, and then you've got competence. So the beliefs in trustworthiness were on farmers, retailers, manufacturers, and authorities, and those were divided into openness, competence, and care. And it's kind of moved things around a little bit. The social trust it should just appear once. So I think you'd need to kind of unpick this, or not, or just be very conscious that it can do strange things. It looks very pretty. I mean, I really like the look of it. It looks great, but then you look at it and you think, oh, hang on. It hasn't quite understood it, and the model it's adapted is more straightforward, not nearly as beautiful. But
yeah, and I think, and I totally, I 100% agree on treat the outputs from the model with a pinch of salt. But I think probably there's value in playing around with the prompting of how do you specify to it to be accurate to the original model, etc. But yeah, So I'm not trying to be evangelistic about generative AI in this presentation. Just there are some things it can do quite well.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know which bits it can do well.
And I think my understanding from talking to people more heavily involved in even in the development side of these models is that most of the world is in an exploration phase of what can these systems do and where do they fail and how do you make them do better. So I think everybody's in a similar boat. That, yeah, as always, there's the trade-off of how much time do I invest in doing that versus just generating it myself. So yeah, I appreciate that.
So I also tried putting in, I asked it to describe the study by Creedy et al. 2020, and it came up with differences. So Gemini came up with, you know, the correct study, but the other one came up with, apparently we'd done it in Chinese footballers. So I checked and I couldn't find that study done by anyone called, well, by my name. So it was an interesting comparison. I think it's really good for sort of more general summarizing of you know, if you give it all the information and then say, you know, tidy this up, I'm sure it'd be really nice, and then it can make it beautiful, but you have to perhaps you know, work at it.
Yeah, no,
and not assume that it's accurate.
Sorry to jump in this. I'm a bit conscious of time, and there are quite a few questions on the chat.
Sorry.
So, and there is one hand raised from Catherine. Catherine, do you want to ask your question about the no option that you asked in the chat?
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much, Mike.
Hello.
That was really interesting in lots of ways. I'm somebody that works on AI in several different kind of contexts, so interested in this for all sorts of reasons. So yeah, the question I'd asked was partly you've answered in part, but I wonder actually if I'd be really interested to know, and this is partly because this is one of the things I work on, what sort of ethical frameworks you tend to use when you're using generative AI to help inform what you're doing. So just one small suggestion on the environmental page might be that I think we're very concerned at the moment with usage, but we're not necessarily looking forward enough. So if we look at the water policy, water resources policy that's just been produced, for example, one of the essential areas that the government have identified is on data centres. So this is, you know, the environmental issue is not only when you use it, but there's sort of a broader range going on there. And I also have thoughts about creativity, but I won't ask those now. Though I do think it's an ethical issue that should be in there.
Yeah, Edward, maybe you've got thoughts on this as well. So we don't organizationally have an ethical guide on the usage. I think my personal guide is not don't use it for spurious image. Don't use it for spurious tasks. Try, as in creating silly images and videos. I think that's the worst case use of it. Minimize the use my use of it in two ways. One, I try not to ask it to do things for me. I try and use it to augment what I'm doing. In most cases, if I'm writing something, I don't say, "Can you write this?" I say, "Can you ask me some questions to help me write it?" Or, "I've written this. Can you review it?" Or, "What do you think of this?" So I use it in, like, honestly, try to use it in a reviewing pattern. Where I use it most often in that sort of creative sense is in the writing of code, computer code, where I think it's really extremely powerful as an efficiency guide particularly for things that would be routinely done otherwise. If you're writing cutting edge code to do something, I think obviously it's not as relevant. So that didn't particularly answer your question about ethics, other than touching on some points, but it's kind of the way I've attempted to use.
No, but it's also interesting for me that you don't have, you know, that there isn't a very clear set of systems. So I think that in itself is interesting. I think just for everyone else, UKRI obviously have some research policy already related to generating applications, but they're very behind when it comes to generating outputs. But I suspect they won't be for long. So these kind of conversations, I think, will also feed into, you know, when we're funded by UKRI, what we're allowed to do, I think will be coming. You know.
Yeah, and I should have said, and clearly we generally have a policy of not putting sensitive information into these systems. That's kind of, I should have said that at the top.
Thank you, Mike. There is another question in the chat, as we are all members of the LUNZ Hub project. So Star is asking, in your experience, how do policymakers feel about the use of AI in developing evidence? It seems increasingly hard to discriminate between the grounded evidence and the outputs influenced by AI.
I think it's an incredibly important question. It goes beyond policy to other domains, but I think so. I don't have personal experience of using it to inform policymakers, other than there are parts of the policy making process, for example, evidence generation, formal evidence generating process, which are very receptive to the efficiencies that LLM systems can make within very carefully validated frameworks. So if somebody asked a question about, are there automated loops for checking these things? So there are systems for checking, given the system we've got, how accurate is it as recalling information from the database that we've got. So you can do those kind of checks to make an assessment of how accurately you're recalling information. I'm not sure widely whether what the levels of trust are in these systems. I do think there's other cases which are kind of easier to answer, which are around making information, and perhaps not quite specialized information, more accessible to more users. And I think that's kind of for me, that's a better fit for these models. So being able to provide I'm going to say accurate information that's sort of scientifically robust, but in ways and in forms using language that is more easily interpreted and used by people in different parts of the world, or indeed in this country. So sorry, partly answered your question and moved on to a different one. I don't know if that's useful or not. Ebru, I don't know if we've got experience working directly with policies.
Star, do you want to comment on this before we move to next question?
And I was just asking my colleague Ebru to come in.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't, for instance, whenever we want to prepare a brief or something that can inform policymakers, we don't upload like confidential information. And I always try to ask, like, can you give me verifiable resources? And then I go double check those resources. So that's very important. You can ask for those where does the model get the info, and you can verify those resources or articles, etc. So that's one thing. And also I think the most used case is like I use it for efficiency purposes, like most of the time, as Mike said, like easier to write codes, review, summarize, identify gaps, etc. And you need to talk to the GenAI, like you need to give directions, and you need to like give like further explanation, and it's like a conversation you need to make in order to achieve a result that is closer to what you want. Yeah, that's it.
Can I come in briefly, Evie?
Yes.
Yeah, is that Star? Sorry,
yes, thanks. I think my concern is that it's the traceability element of it. It's very simple to say at the end of it, you know, this briefing was made with the use of AI, but it's very difficult to sort of demonstrate where that was and how that was, because we're having that ongoing conversation and we're getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So I am concerned about, I feel like there's a value in grounded research and representing data that we've got from practical experience or from stakeholders' actual words and feelings, and that there's a danger with AI that everything is too easy to make it look slick and be said in very sort of structured way and conventional words, that's creating a kind of bias that policymakers are looking for that very simplistic explanation of things, and that we are losing some of that quality and the groundedness of genuine research. That's a kind of concern that I have personally.
No, I think that's valid. I mean, I'm not going to comment on societal shift towards smaller attention spans, but no, I think that's about. I think I would just say that, so there are, I've been talking mostly about like the consumer facing platforms to allow you to do this easily. I think it's becoming increasingly easy to implement your own bespoke system to do this. So if you have an evidence base that you want to then accurately or more accurately recall from to generate like a structured document, that's kind of more what I was alluding to when I meant like policymakers or decision makers' interest in that evidence generation pipelines. So more efficient, but trying to make them more robust. And I knew that the other platform that we've worked with quite a lot is a platform called Climate Policy Radar, who are so it's not specifically LUNZ based, but it's essentially using these systems to analyze climate policy commitments. So essentially reviewing national action plans and submissions to UNFCCC to profile or structure that information of what different countries are planning to use. So it's not necessarily providing evidence to, well, I mean, it can be used to guide evidence on gaps and that kind of thing, but it's using these models to construct then databases that you can recall from with some accuracy. So, but yeah, I get these consumer facing platforms do have downsides in that sense.
Thanks, Mike.
No worries.
I think there is time for one last question, and I might have missed a few. Finn, maybe you can correct me, but there is another one from Mike regarding the analysis. I think it refers to the Rothamsted example. Is there a loop process for quality control and validation of the output? Or is the emphasis still on human assessment?
So I think with these consumer systems, I think there's again. So I think my primary response would be yes. There's a human in the loop is better. So there are approaches whereby you can generate that in one platform, put it into another platform, and then ask it to review or spot gaps in it. So you can do a kind of within system review process. I've only used that in a coding environment. I'm not. Maybe it will pick up errors in a data analysis system. Not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm conscious of time, so it's already 12 o'clock. Thank you very much for the questions and the chat and also the comments. We will share the recordings and some notes and a brief summary of this session on LUNZ Hub website. Thank you very much all for attending, and see you soon in September.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye for now.
Really
Bye,
helpful.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.